Today we are talking about Sons of Liberty Gunworks flagship model, their M4-76. I apologize in advance for my voice. I lost my voice out at Average Joe's, but we're gonna make it through this together. A quick disclaimer, I did receive this from Sons of Liberty Gunworks as a T&E rifle, so big thank you to them. And for those of you who watched the video where I went to visit Big Tex Outdoors, you can watch that up here. But you know that along the way, I stopped to pick this up at Sons of Liberty. Mike actually asked me to come by the shop so I could see some of the behind the scenes of how they go about building their rifles, what goes into them, some of their philosophy behind what they do, the quality control, the procedures, everything that they do, and what they're about as a company, the culture they're trying to build, and how they're trying to leave a legacy in the 2A community. So thanks to Mike and the team there for having me out and showing me around. Great crew, and very appreciative of that, very eye-opening and insightful to be able to see that. Before we get into the specs of it, it will come in a soft case, and then you do get your 3 metal mags. Let's get into the specs of the rifle. Now, I will leave a link down below so you can see more in depth. If you want to look really at the details of every particular piece of this rifle, you can go look at those specs there. Starting at the front, we have the Nox muzzle device, and the Nox is essentially their version of a war comp. However, I do believe it performs better than a war comp, and we'll talk more on that later. That is going to be pin and welded to their 13.7 barrel. Now, their barrels are cut by BA, but they are cut to their specifications and what they believe is best. Then you will have their gas block with their specific gas block journal tolerances to help alleviate some of the gas bleed off that you'll see from other manufacturers. Now, the barrel is going to be a GI profile, and again, you can see all the details down below and at that link. Covering all that, you're going to have the wedge lock rail, and then you will have the Mega Zev forgings for the upper and lower. Inside of that, you're going to have a mil-spec BCG with a mil-spec trigger. They're enhanced mil-spec. It is a nice mil-spec trigger. It has a nice clean break, so I'll show you that really quick. The break on it is pretty nice, and then the reset is very positive, and it's, you know, if you're using something like a Geisley, it may not be what you like, but compared to other mil-spec triggers in the market, it is a nice trigger. Now, then you have their collaborative effort with Ford Controls for the safety and then for the buffer tube. Now, the safety, I believe, is probably one of the best safeties on the market now, even better than the Radian. I really, really enjoy their safety that they've come out with. And then the buffer tube system, again, is their collaborative effort with Ford Controls, which houses a Voltor system inside. And then you're going to have their Radian charging handle marked with Sons of Liberty Gunworks logo. And then to finish it off, you have B5 grip and then B5 stock. That's a quick overview of the rifle and what it comes with. Again, if you want to deep dive into the specs of all that, you can check that out down below. Now, something else I will note when it comes to the manufacturing side of it, there are a lot of QC checks, not just on the rifle as a whole, but on each individual component. So they check the barrels, they QC the barrels when they come in, they QC the BCGs, they QC everything individually when it comes in, and then once the rifle is being built out, it goes through its own individual QC process, which is checked 2 or 3 times along the way, and then test fired multiple times to ensure that everything is functioning properly before it is sent out to distributors and dealers. So I thought that was awesome to see how they go about doing that and the QC that they offer. One quick note on the BCG and the coating they use on the BCG. It is magnesium phosphate, and when I spoke with Mike, he said that the reason they use that is they believe that through the military testing, what they've seen through their testing and their trials and their findings, they believe that to be the optimum coating for performance when it comes to BCGs. So they didn't feel there was a need to change it or try to use something special or something different because this has done so well and continues to do well in the military and in their testings. And I think that also adds to kind of some of the other things that Mike mentioned about kind of their philosophy. He said, you know, we try not to use proprietary parts because we want it to be serviceable by the end user. And I thought that was really interesting because essentially what he's saying is like, look, if, you know, at the end of the day, we're all preparing for something, whatever that is, whether this is being used in duty or like an end of the world gun or whatever it may be. He said that if something did happen and you had to service this gun, if something broke, it would be really hard to find proprietary parts. But by keeping everything easily accessible or you know, sort of the norm, it makes it easy to change things out. Or even if you're just somebody who likes to tinker with their guns and mess with things, you can do that. And so I thought that was an interesting take, that he's not only thinking about the building of the gun, but also the end user's interaction with it and how many of us like to change and mess with things. But getting into performance and how the gun performed. So the gun ran great. I took it out to Seattle with me. I shot it up in Seattle. I had a few other people run it up there. I also ran it at a couple of our training days, and then eventually took it out and tried to push it out. So overall, the gun has run well. There's been no issues with it. I've had no cycling issues, suppressed or unsuppressed. It shoots really well. So let's talk accuracy. So this is one of those areas where you guys were not happy that I didn't go in depth on with the Noveske, because the Noveske didn't have a sub-MOA guarantee. Now I asked Mike, I said, hey, do you have a sub-MOA guarantee? And he said, look, we don't technically have a guarantee, but all of our guns should be capable of sub-MOA. He said, the reason we can't guarantee it is because there's too many variables, right? What type of ammo is being used, the skill set of the shooter, what position are they shooting out of, what optic are they using, the conditions. There's too many variables. So they don't feel like it's fair to offer a guarantee, but they do say that it is capable of it. So I had Brandon help me out, and we got it zeroed in at 50 and then went out to 100. And the best groups I could do at 100 initially were just like 2.5 inches, 3 inches consistently. And this, I think, was attributed to the fact that I was using the aim point with the magnifier. So Brandon and I were talking at length about this, and this is one of the limitations of using a red dot magnifier. And so we'll talk about that in a future video. But I wanted to be fair and to actually test it. So we went out, we mounted the AccuFire on there, and I had Taylor go out with me at a later date. And we shot out, and Taylor ended up putting together his best group was like a 1/4 inch group at 50 yards, and then we went out to 100, but we couldn't film any of it because it was pouring down rain on all of us, and then it was like super muddy, so it was just not a good time. So I waited a few days so it all dried up, went back out, and then went to put a group together again, and got about a 1 inch group. And that's with 55 grain, 5.56, just some cheap ammo. Now I do believe that with match grade ammo, I can tighten that group up to probably 1/2 inch. And also I think the other contributing factor would be putting a trigger that I'm probably more comfortable with, something like a Geisley 2-stage. And that's just preference, right? That's just me. Some of you who are more skilled shooters could probably still put together a better group. But I say all that to say it is a capable sub-MOA gun. Everything that I've seen in shooting it leads me to believe it is a capable sub-MOA gun. Now, while they might not guarantee it, yes, I think you can do it. Even if I can get that type of group with some cheap 5.56 and a mil-spec trigger, I think absolutely you can get some really tight groups with some match grade ammo. The only issue is just like we know how ammo is right now, so it's kind of hard to get that out and test it. But it was great, it was consistent, it was good. Really enjoyed shooting the rifle, had a lot of fun with it, and had no issues hitting IPSC targets or C-zone targets out to 150, 200 yards, just with the red dot. And then once we put the LPVO on there, it was even easier. With the performance of the gun, and then it's performed really well. The gun shoots well, it's accurate, it cycles really well. So I've cycled it both with a suppressor and without, no issues. Now running the Nox muzzle device, the Nox has been super nice. I think it is better than the Warcomp because it's more effective. And I will say there's a noticeable difference when you shoot this rifle. It's an interesting feeling when you first shoot it because it is probably one of the flattest guns I've ever shot, but it's not necessarily one of the softest guns I've ever shot. So I've always, other guns that I've shot that shoot really flat typically shoot very soft because they're usually like custom competition, like 3-gun rifles or something like a Knights or a Triarch, where they have these really reduced gas systems. And the way that they've done it is through this Nox muzzle device, and it keeps the front of the gun down, but it still has enough gas cycling through so that it'll overcome obstructions. So what I mean by that is I talked with Mike at length about this. He told me kind of his philosophy behind it. He said, look, we can make a really soft shooting gun. He said we can reduce gas port sizes, we can do everything we can to make the gun feel very, very soft shooting. And what we mean by that is the reciprocating mass, essentially the bolt and the buffer coming back, reducing that feeling of when it hits at the back and cycling forward. He said we can do everything we can to reduce that. He said, but at the end of the day, once we do that, once there is any kind of variable introduced into that system, whether it be carbon fouling or dirt or sand or whatever it is, it will start to impede that cycling. And then you'll have issues where it won't cycle certain ammo or it won't cycle properly in certain conditions. And so that's kind of their philosophy. Like we want enough gas in there to overcome any of those variables that may be introduced, because this is, in their eyes, designed to be a duty rifle. And it does that. It cycled everything fine. I ran 5.56, 55 grain, just some like cheap 55 grain ammo through it. We ran green tip through it. And then I even had Shabazz run some steel case through it, and no issues across the board, suppressed or unsuppressed. Now it didn't get super dirty, but still no issues, and haven't really cleaned it since we've shot it. It runs well. It cycled all the ammo well, and I didn't feel it was overgassed. It wasn't a harsh shooting gun, and it was still a pleasure to shoot, suppressed, unsuppressed. So after getting to spend some time behind this gun, I truly feel like this gun is probably one of the better, if not best value guns on the market. And what I mean by that is that it's not, I don't want to use value in the sense of like cheap, but value in the sense of what you're getting for like pound for pound. Like what you're getting for what you're paying is probably the best, especially in that sub $2,000 range. Because I think the rifles that everybody kind of looks at as kind of when anybody says, hey, what do you recommend getting? I think the top three that come to mind recently is the Geisley, the BCM, and Daniel Defense. That's kind of everybody's go-tos. And, there are other rifles out there, but you're going to pay more for those. There's also cheaper ones out there, but when you get into those cheaper ones, those are, I think the price range below that is more so about just getting a rifle. And everything above that is more of like starting to get into like really Gucci, whether that's in appearance or in some of the millings or just custom rifles. That's above that. So like kind of that middle range is where a lot of people try to find like, hey, what's the best you can get just like out of the box? And everyone always points to Daniel Defense, BCM, Geisley. But for the price, and now we're going off a retail price, and a quick note on retail price. I use retail price because it is the baseline that we have to measure, right? Because every distributor, dealer is going to sell it one way or another. Having been on the back end and being able to work at gun stores and sell at gun stores, I know there's different ways they sell products that can make them cheaper, but all we have to go off of as an equal baseline is retail. So that's what I use in my reviews. Now, this retails for $17.76, and you'll find it maybe more expensive or cheaper at different places. But based off of retail, for what you're getting out of this rifle and how it performs, it is going to be a better product than the Geisley, than the Daniel Defense, and then the BCM. Again, the Geisley, yes, you're getting ambi controls, but their buffer system isn't as good. The Super 42 is, I know some guys love it, but it's just not as good as the Voltor system. And then their rail, I know everybody loves the URGI rail, but I hate to break it to you guys, it's just not that great of a rail. Their rails aren't what they were 4 years ago or 3 years ago. So I think you're getting a better rail in the wedge lock. You're getting a better QC and a better brand company as a whole through Sons of Liberty. And then looking at the Daniel Defense, your ambi controls out of the Sons of Liberty are going to be better. Again, better rail, better buffer system than the Daniel Defense, hands down, and still cheaper than both of those. Both cheaper than the Geisley, cheaper than the Daniel Defense. Now the BCM retails for less, but you're also getting less out of the BCM. And then along with, I've started to hear issues recently of QC issues out of BCM, things just not being up to the standard that we've come to know and love from them. And then I think the most discouraging thing was kind of the interaction I saw between them and Engineer Shooter. So Engineer Shooter, when I was up in Seattle, we talked briefly about it, and then it's kind of been on social media a little bit. But at the end of the day, like, he had an issue, he went to them, and they kind of scoffed at him and said, hey, look, we haven't had any issues with any of our other contracts. This is like a you problem, so maybe you should just take your money and go to a different company. And as somebody who works with a brand like Triarch and knowing how they've handled their issues with customers, it's like, man, that just doesn't sit right with me, because I look at what Triarch has done and done everything to try to make it right. And then I look at a company like that does that and says, hey, go somewhere else. That's just not a good way to do business in my eyes. But everyone has their own opinions. That's just for me. Now, when it comes to Sons of Liberty, they have excellent customer service and incredible warranty. So probably one of the better warranties in the industry, because if you shoot out one of their barrels, they're going to replace it. If you start messing with something because you wanted to change this or that and you mess it up, they're going to fix it for you. And then, if you break something, they'll replace it. They'll help you fix it. And when it comes to customer service, they're easily accessible. So Mike actually puts out his cell phone number on social media, so you can call or text him. And if you have questions, he'll answer them and he'll work with you through problems. And he's even like FaceTime guys or like called guys so that he can work through a problem with them. And I say all that so that I can bring up the only issue that I've had with this gun. And I use issue lightly. It hasn't really been an issue, but it's something that occurred, right? But I only bring this up here because I think it highlights the customer service and the company and brand that you're buying into when you buy a Sons of Liberty rifle. So I did have one issue where I had this like little hairline, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's a scratch or nick in the gas tube, and it was letting gas bleed off, and it was causing, you know, that particular area of the rail to get hot. And I talked with Mike. Mike and I went back and forth trying to diagnose where it was coming from. He said, hey, take the rail off, take a look at it, see what you see. And I did. And I got photos sent to him. He said, that's interesting. He said, send it back to us. We'll get it fixed. So when I'm done here, this will be going back. It didn't negatively impact the performance of the gun. It still performed well. I didn't notice it until I noticed the gas getting hot, and then later seeing where the gas had bled off as it dried up on the rail. And I don't think this is a QC issue. I don't think it's any type of issue, because everyone that I've talked to that's run a Sons of Liberty and every other Sons of Liberty gun that I've shot hasn't had this issue. So I think this is just like a freak accident. But I say all this to highlight the type of customer service and warranty that they offer, because immediately it was like, no questions asked, we'll fix it. You know, send it back to us, we'll get it right back to you. He even told me, he's like, hey, you know, based on where you're at, you'll have it the next day. And so it's been cool to see that, as to where other companies are going, well, you know, that's kind of like your problem. When you're buying a Sons of Liberty, you're not just buying the product, you're also buying into the brand and what they have to offer, and your like after purchase care, your warranty, your customer service. I would highly recommend you check them out. Check out Big Tex Ordinance, and they do drops of them. So as they get them in, they put them up, but they go really fast. So make sure you hop on it when you can. And as always, use goonlife, saves you some cash. So if you feel like I missed anything, you feel like I left anything out, if there's questions you have about it, leave it in the comments down below. Leave comments anyways. Just leave me something in there. It helps the algorithm. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe. Karate chop that bell so you get notified every time I upload a video. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Also, shirts. So we have a few shirts left. There's only a handful of these left, and it's in limited sizes. Sorry for you larger guys. I know you guys who are wearing 3Xs have asked. In the next batch, we will do 3Xs, but we got to sell out through these first. So let's get these sold first. Hit the link down in the description and purchase one of those. As soon as we sell out of these, we'll look at doing another order. But yeah, check those out. We've got a few designs left that still have a full run of sizes. And that helps Average Joes continue to produce content, helps me continue to produce content. So appreciate you guys.